In my review for the first game of Bayonetta 1, I talked about how Hideki Kamiya, who was the director of that game, Bayonetta 1, took elements from his games that he's done in the past and kind of put it all together to make the first game. And I did, even though that he took those things for good things, there were just some glaring issues with the game, and that was really holding it back. But the thing is, when I was playing this game in Bayonetta 2, it was like they watched my review and then they watched my spoiler review and said, let's listen to this guy. Let's fix all the things he was talking about that was making the game holding it back. Because when I was playing this game, it truly was feeling like they looked at those things and they improved them for the better. And it made my time with this game extremely enjoyable. Welcome to my review of Bayonetta 2. For all my reviews, they will be spoiler free, and not to worry about those that want to talk spoilers, there always will be an accompanying video to this one called Spoiler Talk, and you can look forward to that either this week or next week. And when we get to the spoiler talk, there's nothing that is off limits when we get into the spoiler talk in the comments below, but I do ask for this video that if you're going to leave comments below, please do leave them spoiler free. So getting right to the meat of everything, the game begins a few months after the first game of Bayonetta. Bayonetta's kind of go shopping, and she's kind of ran into some baddies. No surprise to that. So during the fight, something goes wrong, and Jean, not Jean, Jean, she ends up getting hurt to the point where her soul gets split from her body and her soul gets dragged to Inferno, which is hell, in that example. And so Bayonetta is trying to find a way to save her, and she ends up finding information that can save her where she can get her soul back to her body, but she's on a time crunch. And so as the good friend she is, she decides to go and save her. Now to do that, she must travel to a town. I'm going to pronounce this wrong already. Fimbulvert, Verdi, something like that, which is the gateway to, it's a gateway. It kind of offers you the option to go to heaven or you can go down to hell. And so she must travel to Inferno to go save, to look for her spirit to basically retrieve it and save her friend, Jean. Now, along the way to going to that destination, she meets a boy named Loki. Now, during that time, he is also on his way to the same spot, except he doesn't know why he's going there. He just needs to know. He just knows he needs to go there. He doesn't remember who he is, and he just knows that that's something he needs to do. So, under the circumstances, they decide to work together, Bayonetta and Loki. And basically, the final element I can tell you of this game is that there is also an opponent that is chasing you and trying to kill you and Loki. And you'll find out more reasons later on in the game. Can't spoil very much, so I can't spoil anything. So we'll talk about it in the spoiler review because there's lots to talk about in regards to the story in the spoiler review. But that's the setup for everything. Now, something I do have to say about the story. The story overall is a lot better than the first game. It still does have some problems, and I kind of will tell you generally what my issue is, and we'll go really in depth when it comes to the spoiler talk, because again, this is a heavier story element game compared to the last game, which I think they better explained Bayonetta's past in this game than they did in the first game. But unfortunately for this game, they rely on the relationships that they think that you have established from the first game into the second game, and trying to say, let's build on those relationships. The issue is you didn't really build relationships in the first game, and so you're left not to care. So an example, when John gets pulled to Inferno, gets pulled to hell, you don't care, because in the first game there wasn't that much of a connection. Like there wasn't a way, they didn't build it correctly. And I talked about the issues with the first game on building the characters in my spoiler talk. So if you want more context in that, I highly encourage you check out my spoiler talk for the first Bayonetta. But they're trying to build off those relationships, and there wasn't relationships that were be able to be built off of, because there wasn't any. So, but I can go into more details in our spoiler talk, but at the moment I gotta leave it at that because I don't want to spoil the game for you. So, but again, I still like the story in this one than I did in the first game. It just tried to build on the relationships from the first game that you didn't have. So it made some of those moments not as great as they could have been. Now, for Bayonetta's combat, it stayed mostly the same, but has done some changes that truly I believe are for the better, and made some really great adjustments along the way. So it is still big on being a button combination driven game. So you got punches and kicks and gunfire, and you kind of mix up those combinations together to make different move sets to take down your opponents. Now they also rely on a mechanic they did in the first game, which was really great and really, it was different in the fighting world, and it made it great, which was called the witch time mechanic. And it's a mechanic where if an enemy tries to hit you and you dodge it right before it hits you, it slows down time, and then you can attack your opponent multiple times before you get back to kind of normal speed. This really, like in the first game, it really encourages you to understand your opponents, kind of how they fight, how you fight. And so I was catching on throughout the game. I was catching on different things of how, when an opponent was going to attack me, and then I could avoid it. And it just really understands your opponent's patterns and how they're going to approach you and attack. So it really encourages those kinds of things, and I think that's for the better in this case of this type of game. And hint for one of them, I noticed one of the opponent, its eyes would light up and shoot a flash of light right before it was going to attack me, and I always would get it right on the witch time mechanic. Now, they do something that is new called the Umbra Climax. Now, this is when you get your magic meter fully up gauged, and basically to fill your gauge, you can either give yourself a lollipop that's going to give yourself that boost. You can do witch time dodges for for so many times and then build that meter up. So once you get into that, so there were summonings in the first game, and the summonings really were kind of to finish off a boss. The only other time that a summoning really took place that you kind of had control of, it was kind of like a finisher in your regular combination. It would either incorporate a fist coming out or a heal coming out of a summoning seal to do a damaged attack. Now in this one, in the Umbra Climax, literally every move you do, punch, kick, and finisher, are all different types of summonings. The normal combinations are punches and kicks that are summonings, but then your finishers, instead of just being the normal heal and punch, because you're doing the summoning of the heal and punch in the Umbra Climax, you're doing a summoning of a creature that you use to finish off your opponents in the game. And they use them in such interesting ways. It's so flashy, it's so fun, and it makes you feel powerful. It makes you feel like you're kicking ass. And it's flashy, and it works. I think it's a great addition to the game to make you feel more powerful, because just like in the first game, there isn't much in regards to a progression system. There isn't a way to build up your hit points. There is a way, but it's not like you earn it through points throughout the game. That's something that you can find in little secret hidden spots throughout the game. But again, there isn't much in regards to a progression system, like paying to improve your skills. The only thing you can do to pay to improve is either weapons that you can add to yourself, and you buy all these things, again, at the Gates of Hell, which is what I called the gun bar in the first game. It reappears in the second game, and you can buy all those things. You can buy new techniques, but really doesn't change the core mechanic of the game and how powerful you are, because you stay just as powerful as you were when you started. It just opens up some new moves. But again, this was a nice way to kind of show progression, that she is stronger than she was in the first game, and without having to like pay for it in any way in regards to like in currency in the game. It's a great progression system in not being a progression system. Again, like in the first game I talked a little bit about just a second ago, you can involve different kind of weaponry to switch out between. Just instead of having all 4 guns, you can have 2 swords. You can do other things. I don't want to spoil some of the stuff, because some of the weapons are very, very interesting that you can add to your arsenal, and you can kind of choose how you want to play. Certain weapons have certain advantages, and I liked using the pistols this time. I used a sword the last round, but I didn't like using the swords this time, and I really liked using the pistols. So to each their own. So the thing I will say in regards to enemies, though, that you still are fighting angels, and these ones surprisingly look less demony than they did in the last game, because now because you're going to Inferno and you're trying to save Jean in hell, you are actually going to start fighting enemies that are from hell, and those look awful. Not awful as like they don't look good in regards to like graphically and stuff like that. They don't look nice. They look evil, which is great. That's the whole point of being from hell. So, but you still are fighting those people, and it's new enemies, and it's kind of cool to have a comparison. I like comparing the two and kind of seeing how they compare and contrast in regards to having an enemy from heaven and you're fighting an enemy from hell, in regards to how they fight you, to how they look, to the color schemes. It's so interesting. And also, I will have to say that the game, about a quarter of the game, I say maybe less than a quarter of the game, that there are enemies that it would be helpful if you played the first game, because they have the same exact fighting moves and they are the same exact enemies as in the first game. So it would be very helpful if you played that one, because you're not going to have to relearn a lot of the enemies again because you played the first game. That's all I can say. There's a lot to talk about in the spoiler talk. This spoiler talk is going to be awesome to talk about. But I highly encourage you to play the first game anyways. But this is just a bigger reason that you need to go play the first game, because you're going to run into enemies that you fought in the first game, and it'll make it a lot better of an experience going into the second game. Now, I had some issues with the first game. Like I said in the very beginning of my review, I had some story issues that I talked about already and I've talked in my spoiler talk. But the other big thing was the camera in the fighting, and it was how the character moved in combat. I felt like the character was too light. She was too loose. When I was moving the stick, I felt like I was moving a rag doll. I wasn't moving someone that actually had weight to them. And so I felt like I had less control rather than more control. And I said, I want for the second game, I want more control of my character and no camera issues. Well, I can tell you, 0 on the camera issues, everybody. I ran into 0 camera issues in the entire game, which was excellent. I really liked that. It really... Again, like I said in my first review for Bayonetta 1, I talked about how this is a type of game that has been out for over a decade, and the fact that that game came out and it had such glaring issues with the camera. Now, I don't mind having maybe 1 or 2 issues. It's understandable. It's a game. You'll run into some crazy scenarios that you just don't understand. But in that game, they were so frequent. It was so frustrating, and it just didn't make sense because, again, it's been an issue. This type of game's been out for a decade. How do you still making camera issues in this game? So they have gone and fixed that right away. So there were 0 camera issues, and she felt not like a rag doll. She actually had weight to her movement. It was really great. I liked it a lot. It made the dodging a lot more effective. I was able to feel like I actually was moving my character and being able to dodge at the right time and be able to use the witch mechanic a lot better and a lot more. And it just made it feel more tight. And it made it feel like I had more control of my character, and that's what you want in this kind of game. You want control of your character. You have to. That's the whole point of the game, is the better control you have, the better you're going to do with fighting in the game. Now, the bosses. In the first game, the bosses were really star of the game, and there's no denying that. I even literally made a top 3 best bosses in my spoiler talk for Bayonetta 1 because the bosses were such a delight and an impact for the game. I do have to say that these bosses were a lot less memorable in regards to the epicness. And they weren't just... There were some good bosses, and I will mention them in my spoiler talk, but I'm not going to make a list because there is one boss battle that I do have to talk about in the spoiler talk that will go super in-depth. But I will say in regards to that boss battle that fight will honestly make my top 10 best boss battles of all time. And all I can say, because I don't want to spoil it because the fight is so epic and so amazing, is it's not necessarily what I was doing in regards to me fighting. It was was going on around me in the boss battle that made the boss battle so amazing. And I truly did not expect that. And I didn't think they could up the game in regards to a boss battle, but man, they had put it through the roof for this specific boss battle, and it did nothing but impress me. Unfortunately for its downfall, though, because this boss battle was so early in the game, the rest of the boss battle seemed not as epic, and it wasn't as satisfying. So it has its happies and it has its high, it has its lows. But again, even though I was playing the other boss battles, they still were good boss battles. They still stuck with the Bayonetta type of boss battle, which was still good, because Bayonetta 1, again, I said the bosses are the highlight. They highlight the bosses in these as well. But just that epic boss battle really turned everything, made everything seem so much smaller and less significant in regards to how to battle a boss, except for one boss that I will talk about in the spoiler talk. There is one more boss battle that was as memorable, but not as amazing. It will not make my top 10 best boss battles of all time, but it was pretty good about keeping up with how good that other boss battle was. Now, the music. The one thing I was just something that they did less that I actually truly missed. And it might be I totally missed it. I might have not even seen it or noticed it, or it was just the music. I mentioned it in my first review for Bayonetta that I loved the jazz pop soundtrack, and it gave it some character, it gave it some lightheartedness for how dark the game was, and it just seemed somehow very non-existent. I saw it a lot in the beginning, the very beginning it showed up, but really throughout the rest of the game it just seemed to disappear. And unexpectedly, I just really wanted it back, because the music was so good. It gave it such a tone. It gave it such a lightheartedness to it that I think Bayonetta had in this game, that she still had she was less charismatic, I would say, in this game than she was in the first game. She was toned down a bit in this second game than she was in the first game. And so something that could have helped her give her back her spunk a little bit more would be the music. And I was missing it. I really was. The only time it would appear was when I was summoning one of my ending to end a boss battle. And usually there was more to the music than just those moments. And so I kind of missed it a little bit. Hopefully they bring it back for the third game, because I think the music and the soundtrack is truly unique and awesome, and it really brings a great tone to the game. Now, something they changed that I didn't even notice that I wanted until I played this game was the change in the color palette. The first game had lots of dark colors, and I kind of noticed it was a little dark, but I didn't have much issue with it. But once I saw how they done this game, it's like they took the color spectrum and said, let's go a whole 180 than what we did with this first game. Let's flip it. Let's use a lot of whites and blues and light colors, and really, it was really dynamic, and it really, especially when you were in different areas, it really made each area feel different and unique and special, and it looked great. So it was something that I was truly surprised about, and I just didn't even expect it. And on top of that, in this game, I have to say specifically, quote unquote, it looks great on all aspects from beginning to end. And the reason why I say it does look better than the last game is because there is something that happens in the game where you can kind of compare the two a little bit. And I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm going to leave it at that. But if you play the game, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to talk about that specifically in the spoiler review. Kind of. It'll be a story part, but never mind. We're just not going to talk about the rest of it. But basically, there is a way I can compare how it looked compared to both times. And I love this color palette. It really just shot out. It really made it look poppy and unique, and it just worked. It really worked. It really added. And if Bayonetta's, and here's the other issue that I had earlier when I was talking about Bayonetta and her character and the music, if the music matched the color in Bayonetta's attitude that you took from the first game in the music and you put it with this color, it would have worked so well. It would have worked so well because it would have played off each other. It would have played off how charismatic, happy, and how she's just so unapologetic about herself, with that music that always appears everywhere, with this great color scheme of just popping and a lot of bright colors and in your face and all unapologetic about it. They just would have went well together, but the character was a little bit more mellow, and so I liked the color scheme. Hopefully they bring back kind of the stuff from the first game in regards to her and her charismaticness and the music. Just saying. Now, thank you. Another huge complaint I had in my non-spoiler review was quick time events. There are 0 quick time events in this game. There is button mashing, which I am fine with. It's really easy to figure it out and be able to hit the button really quick. But I had such an issue with the quick time events in the first game. It was such a setback for the game, and I felt like could have been fine without it. And I can tell you it was great without it. It really worked out great. So, no quick time events. Yes. One of the final things I do want to mention is that they had made some changes in regards to the difficulty. So in my first review for Bayonetta, I mentioned that you do want to play probably on easy mode because there is no hard mode. And so normal is kind of their hard mode. And so if you don't have experience with these type of games, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Even though I play all my games on normal because that is kind of the standard for how everybody plays their games, and kind of it's a good spectrum to kind of tell how difficult the game can be for people. And so I did play this one on normal, and they also had a hard mode. So I will say this normal mode was easier than the normal mode on Bayonetta 1. And so if you are coming into this game and haven't really played a Bayonetta game before, or this type of game, either it's like a Devil May Cry or DMC, if you haven't played that type of game before, you can go into normal, and if you're a decent experienced gamer, be able to handle it pretty well. And then I would just say if you're an experienced Bayonetta player or experienced DMC player, you could play it on hard mode and have some challenge within it. But I'm going to tell you that the normal mode is not as challenging as it was in Bayonetta 1, but it still had some moments where it was quite a challenge, especially in certain boss battles. But overall, this game was way better than the last one, which is exactly what you want in a sequel. The story elements, I would say, are better than the first game, like I said before, and it still had problems. And again, we'll go deep diving into the specific issues of why those story elements didn't work as well as they could have. But I still commemorate them for making the story better than it was in the first game. The combat is truly great. Now I can say I have no issues with the combat whatsoever. I'm a person that doesn't really go back and play these kinds of games, but I wouldn't mind going back to play more Bayonetta 2 to try to improve my trophies that I got based off like the room, how well I did in each room. I wouldn't mind going back and doing that because the combat was so good. It was sweet spot. I mean, I don't know how they're going to top it in Bayonetta 3, but keep with it. If they keep with this thing, they're solid as a rock. And it really keeps me excited about a third game coming out. My final thing I just want to mention, the game does run great on both modes on the Switch. It runs great in handheld mode and it runs great in docked mode. I did both and it ran great. And from the first game, I said I had issues kind of with the sticks, and I thought I was doing better with it in handheld mode in regards to controlling the character. It does great both ways in this one, so there's no complaints anywhere on here. So that is my review of Bayonetta 2. What did you think about the game? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends. And if you want to keep up with the content I'm releasing each and every week here on Freeze Frame Rate, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Now, please look forward to my spoiler talk of Bayonetta 2 that will be out either this week or next week. And again, just a reminder, if you're going to leave comments on this video, please leave them spoiler free. When I release the spoiler talk, we can talk all about spoilers then. Promise, we can talk about spoilers. So, thank you so much for watching. My name is Mitch. I'm signing off saying, See you soon.